other climbers to retrace Cook's route and prove that it was possible and that he could have gotten there. And this battle has been going on for 100 and more years. Did Cook do what he said he did? The Cook Society, which is now Aldo and I and a couple of our board members here, are still fighting that fight. We still believe in him. We still think he was an honest and a good man and an extraordinary explorer. Vern's trip up the mountain, he'll tell you more about it, but from where they were able to see Cook's route and to see that it was possible. And that really erased a lot of the negative criticism. People said he hadn't gotten above 5,000 feet. He had a photo that didn't quite line up. But all that said, sitting on the archives of the Cook Society, there's 60 years of research in this basement that I've been reading and studying and learning about. And I've also been absorbing Dr. Cook's writings. And I can just say nothing bad about him. I think he was an extraordinary man, extraordinary explorer, and his legacy is right here. And I feel a responsibility to move it forward and to show people in the world really what a great explorer, what a great human being, humanitarian, was born right here in our county. So that said, I've been reading about Vern for years, and I was shy, and I finally wrote a little letter, and I made Aldo mail it, and he wrote back. And so that's why we're here today. This feels like it was lining up for years, like I was heading towards this point. And I've met one of the other climbers, Ted Heckathorn, who was with Vern. And to me, it's just so exciting to meet people that have gone up these mountains and done this kind of work. I mean, it blows my mind, and I'm not going to try it.
Why not?
Not this time, But anyway, I don't want to talk too much more. I really am so grateful you all have come today. Vern Tejas.
Back in '94, I was honored by having the Cook Society invite myself, along with our world-renowned climber, Scott Fisher. May he rest in peace on Everest, where he died in '96. We both got invited to work with the Cook Society to establish whether or not there was a route coming out of the Ruth Amphitheater, which is the head snows of the Ruth Glacier. And the Ruth Glacier was actually named, I think, after Dr. Cook's daughter. Any help on that? Do you know if the Ruth was actually named after Dr. Cook's daughter?
Yes.
That was my understanding too. So it's still called that today, out of honor of him being the first explorer to go up that particular glacier. We had shortness of funding and shortness of time, but we were able to climb up onto a ridge that we believe was the route that he would have ascended to get to the summit. So I just cut to the chase, not waste your time, but we established that it was a possibility of a route. We didn't establish that he actually made it to the summit from that route, but that it was out of the question. He could have easily got onto the ridge that we ascertained was a good route to go up. So,
Excuse me, can you speak up just a little bit?
how about that?
Oh, yeah.
It's all position. Okay, thank you. Anyway, it was an honor to work with Scott. It was an honor to work with the Cook Society, and I'd like to give you a little bit of a taste this evening of what the mountain's like, having worked up there for over 40 years, what the conditions may or may not have been like when Dr. Cook was there. So first, I'd like to go through some photos just to kind of give you the setting, and then just recently in '23, I guided an expedition up there, and my co-guide was able to film part of it. So I'm going to give you the technical part first, and then I'm going to put you in the mood of what it must have felt like to be on the mountain with the footage from just a year ago. All right? Okay. With that, I'll get in position here. better now? Good. This is the great one, Denali, from the northeast. We're looking up the mountain from the easterly. This is the north summit. This is the Harper Glacier, named after the native who was the first to climb this route to the summit. And this is the actual true summit, called the south summit of Denali. It's quite rugged, and you can see it's protected by these foothills, and then there's several glaciers coming down. This is the Mulder Glacier, and the Trilaka Glacier flows out from this side of the mountain. The route that Cook could have climbed is right here on the horizon and goes up this steep rock and then into this basin. We were able to take a better look at that. First, I want to establish the viability of it as possibly being his route. A little closer up view again, north summit, south summit. His route would have gone up this and around behind the back of this and then onto this ridge all the way to the summit. This part is reasonably doable, not in question. The sourdoughs, the group that purported to climb it, there was some doubt at the time that he had made it because he did it in very quick ascent time. And so some miners from Fairbanks, Alaska actually came and went up this route, up this steep ridge, and across, and likely up here to go to the north summit. They actually climbed the wrong summit because this is the mountain they could see from Fairbanks in the north. They couldn't actually see this, so they climbed what they could see, and they put a flagpole up there. And that's actually how everybody knew that they got there, because a few years later, Reverend Hudson Stuck and his assistant, Harper and Karsten, his mountaineer guy who had cut the trail up here, established that they could see from here across 2 miles, and they could see the flagpole still flying on top of the north summit. But what wasn't proven was that Cook had come up this route on the east side of the mountain, had gotten up this, across, behind, and then up to the top. So that's why Scott and I were invited to help establish whether or not that was a viable route. Zooming in a little bit closer, this is the questionable head wall. And again, it's very difficult to find good photos of this side of the mountain because this side is very steep, and lots of clouds tend to live right in this area, so planes don't fly over this side very often. And all the other climbs have taken place on the other side of the mountain. So this side doesn't get photographed often, so it's very hard to get shots of this. I had to pore over the internet to come up with these. But ultimately, that bump I was just showing you is this bump. And this is the route that we believe that Cook was able to, easily able to get onto this ridge. And you can see the ridge just goes along. It's not very steep. It's got a couple little bumps in it. Oopsie. That's 800% zoom. That might be too much. Goes along and then bumps up there, goes around back, and then to the summit. This is the questionable part, and that's what I focused on, was this a viable route? This part certainly is. Both Scott and myself agreed to that. Scott was sure that the whole route would go to the top. Unfortunately, that was 94, and Scott and I had decided we'd come back and climb it ourselves in period climbing clothes with alpenstocks and cotton and wool. But unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, Scott died in '96 on Everest. You might have heard the Into Thin Air, seen the movie, read the book, but he never came down, so we never had an opportunity to get back there. From the south side, the ridge is a little bit easier to get to, and we actually came up this route. Sorry, these were ripped off from the internet, so they've got watermarks on them so that nobody can use these. except for B, if you don't mind, A's being written all over your photographs. We camped here. There's Ted, Heckathorn, Walt, Scott and myself camped right here, and then Scott and I were able to go up just next to this ridge on top of this and eyeball the route. We made it to about here, and then we looked along the ridge. You can see it being highlighted right there, and then I could see that wall. That's when I started going like, that's going to be challenging even for a mountaineer today, but doable, but just challenging. That's the North Summit in the background. The basin's right above here. So once you get to the top of this steep section here, it becomes all doable. That's been climbed several times. So that's doable. That's not unknown. No one that I am aware of has ever climbed this whole ridge. This mountain, I believe, is Pegasus Peak, which is only important if you've seen his sketchbook, and he actually has a sketch of this, and we were able to take a photograph that looked really similar to this mountain that's on the other side of the ridge, which is known as the East Buttress. And that's what this is the line that I'm calling the East Buttress that Cook would have gone up if it had to climb out the roof amphitheater. Close up of the route. You can see this ridge looks really passable, kind of lumpy, but then you have to get up this steep part right here. But if you get up that, pretty straightforward. Once you get to the basin, then the rest of the ridge has become a standard route for the east side. A couple more close-ups. An older photograph, late in the summer, so a lot of the snow's gone away from the rocks, but again, you could see our route. We went up this, walked along here. From here, we could see the rest of the route. We'd go bang, bang, bang. That's the steep section I just showed you. And then into what was known as the Thayer Basin. It's just a big snow basin that feeds the glaciers that drop down the east face. This mountain is the Pegasus Peak that there's a sketch of that Cook sketched in his book, in his diary. So we believe that he must have gotten somewhere along the ridge here, perhaps a little further down, perhaps a little further up, but had gotten a view of a mountain that is very well sketched out in his book, and that we believe identified the fact that he must have gotten this high. How could he have gotten a sketch of that mountain without getting that high? And some of that documentation is here, Carol? Oh, there you are. I'm just looking at the light. I don't need it now. I just wanted to know if the museum has that sketchbook.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
So
we don't have the sketchbook, we have a copy of the
a copy.
sketch.
Yeah, that's fine. But that way, if people are interested, they can compare this to that sketchbook and come up with their own opinion of whether or not that was doable. Another longer view. This would be good mountaineering. I've got lots of experience on Denali. I've been able to climb it over 60 times, and this looks like a pathway to the top for me. So that's my experience speaking. A little steeper here, that would be the challenging part, but once you get beyond those rocks, it's pretty smooth sailing. In '77, there was a group who climbed out of the Ruth Amphitheater. They decided to take a shortcut, and instead of taking the ridge, which runs right off the edge, they came up this very steep stretch. And I've talked to an authority on whether or not it was possible for Cook to climb this route, and he's in the camp that it was impossible, and he used as proof these guys' climbs. He told me how many pickets they had placed, over 30 pickets, which is ice protection. It's a big stake that's driven into the ice and snow, and then you clip your rope to that, and it gives you protection when you're climbing so you don't fall to your death. And he told me how much fixed line, how much rope they had installed there so that he could safely go up and down there. And it was his belief that it was impossible to climb the ridge with less than what this group must have taken with them. You can see their route once you get to the top of this ridge, which is the actual real East Buttress. Is pretty straightforward. Camp there, then they're on the ridge. This is the north summit in the background. So the ridge just goes like this and up to the top.
What's the elevation of those different camps?
Okay, we're about 6,000 right down here at the bottom in the Ruth Amphitheater. They're calling it the Sheldon in this one, but most people know it as the Ruth. And then it's just slowly creeps up. By the time you're here, you're probably 8,000, and now you're about 9,000 feet right here. Their basin's going to be at 16,000, and then 17. This is getting close to 18,000 right there. The top is 20,000. So it's a big mountain. Seriously, most people take 3 weeks to climb it. So 3 weeks, Cook said they climbed it in 8 days. So there are a lot of people, modern mountaineers, just go like, well, there's no way you could do that. However, if you have lived and worked on the mountain as much as I have, you know people who have done it. I've climbed to the summit from the other side in 15 hours. I know people who've climbed from this side, and they did it up and over with all the gear in 3 days. So his claim to having climbed it in 8 days seems much more realistic now that people are climbing it much faster. So that's one of the myths we'd like to put to bed. One of his team members, first I'd like to back up just a bit. Cook was an amazing guy. He explored not only in the Arctic, but in the Antarctic and in Alaska. And he was probably one of the best explorers of his day. He had actually circumnavigated the mountain. He was in very good shape. He knew how to use an ice axe. And when people say he couldn't have done it without crampons and modern gear, I think they just don't understand how tough the old guys were. Those old timers were pretty amazing. They did a lot of stuff that was unbelievable. Just the fact that the sourdoughs, just a few years after he climbed it, I think in 1909, they climbed to the top of the North Peak and back down in 16 hours from their high camp. So it's obvious that the old timers didn't climb by the same rules we climb by now. They were there to get it done, and so they moved very quickly. And if you didn't take your tent and your stoves and all your food and supplies up and over, you could move quite quickly in the mountains. This is a couple of routes. This is the Ruth Amphitheater. Again, this big glacial basin here collects all the snow from the southeast side of Denali. They came around, I believe, followed the same path that the Cook Society, along with myself and Scott Fisher, camped right here. Once they get there, it was no big feat to actually look over and see these two mountains, this one being, I believe, what he was calling Pegasus, or we call Pegasus today. And notice how steep this mountain is, the ridge. It's got these spiky bumps on it. This is an artistic rendering, and I think one of the reasons he did that was to make it look impossible. But you saw from some of my photos that it's actually not as precipitous as it looks in this particular drawing. The other group in 77 went up this buttress and used all that equipment that I was talking about. So, where does that take us from here? A little closer, Pegasus being highlighted right there. Their basin. And this route, this part is all known and has been done multiple times. All we have to do is connect this part to that, and it's all doable route. Pegasus. We do have a campment right here, and there's another one. There's a photograph. I just saw it for the first time on the wall that shows another camp probably right in this area. This is still there today from Cook's use of it. There's still a ring of rocks where they set up their tent. And I do not know if this one's still in existence. But then if you get up there high enough, get over the top of this ridge, you can see Pegasus Peak. Note again that there's big sharp bumps here. And in reality, they don't look that sharp or that steep. But a lot of people have been affected by the detractors of Cook's claim to have climbed it. And they said it's impossible. So to make it look impossible, artists have taken a little bit of liberty with the route. I just do an overview here. This is the summit of Denali. These yellow circles are all the areas that I've climbed in and around this ridge. This is the ridge itself. I've climbed this peak, these two peaks, this peak, this peak, this peak, this peak, this peak. I'm bragging right now. This peak, this peak, this peak, this peak. And this little peak here. And I've done a circumnavigation of this mountain. So it was a no-brainer for them to ask me to come here and with Scott get everybody to this point up here where we could check this ridge and see what laid on the other side. Peak 5 goes by a different name on the maps. It's called Silver Throne. But our ridge is just basically just following this lazy line. There's a little bit better view of it. Excuse me. There we go. Came up this area with Burrill. This mountain is named Burrill after him. The glacier is named after his daughter. The route went here, and we believe went here and up there, this being the questionable part, but everything else up here is doable and has been done several times to the summit. A little bit more mellow view of it. Doesn't have those big spiky things. This is actually a three-dimensional satellite view that has been, I lowered the angle on it just so I could see those big bumps. There's some little stuff, but nothing as sharp and as precipitous as you see in the paintings. So this seems to be fairly straightforward route. Then there's this bit right here. That still needs to be checked out in my mind. Pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, Cook was a great explorer. He did the first circumnavigation of the Denali Massif. So this encompasses hundreds of mountains in this particular area, but he went all the way around over the course of a year. I think it was 1903 when he did that. And then could have been 1906 as well. I'm going to need some help from Carol on that. Anyway, it's a straightforward route. It would make sense to follow that yellow line. I'm going to go this way then. If you go to the other side, which he did, there's a very easy access up this little valley onto the Upper Peters Glacier and onto what we call the Northwest Buttress. He was documented climbing up to about this point on the Northwest Buttress. You can see it's steep, almost that same angle as we were looking at on the route he claimed to climb, the steep, difficult part, right there. Why, if he could climb that, even his detractors said he could climb that, and they said he climbed quite well. He was chopping steps. John, could you show him your ice axe, please? John actually climbed Denali before I did. Back in 1977, he carried an axe like this. I believe that Cook would have been carrying something just like this. And this kind of tool, you can swing it and chop the steep ground and actually cut steps. 3 swings with that, and you could actually stand, even without crampons, you could stand. And from there, you chop the next step, step up, chop the next step, and you could climb the mountain. That's how the old mountains were climbed, with that kind of tool there. Thank you, John. got a lot of respect for him. He climbed it in 77. I'll show you the route that he climbed it by. So John would have landed here, where most climbers do, hiked up the Kahiltna Glacier, and ultimately turned the corner here and gone up the west buttress. The east buttress is this one over here that you can see just gets buried behind the south buttress here. This side doesn't get climbed frequently. I've only know of about a half a dozen climbs that have taken place on this side of the mountain. But this side gets climbed lots. So maybe 1,000 people a year will climb it this route. A lot more than when you were there. Anyway,
It was 400.
400. Okay, but now it's more like 1,000 these days.
About 200 made it.
That's still correct. There's typically only about half the people who try to climb Denali get to the top. And that's one of the things these detractors use to say that Cook couldn't have possibly gotten there. It's a 50-50 coin toss to begin with, and then he said he did it in such a short time. That ruled it out. As a matter of fact, one of his team members, Bellamore Brown, became one of his biggest detractors and said that he couldn't have climbed Denali in such a short time any more than somebody could have walked from Brooklyn Bridge to Grant's Tomb in New York City in less than an hour. And that's a hell of an analogy, but I don't think he walked. He would have been a runner because he was moving very fast, and we'll talk about that a little bit in climbing techniques. So I believe this is the high point. Cook came in from this side, this yellow line, and got to there. I have actually climbed this route to the top. It's not that difficult. People are, I think he got turned back by logistics more than the actual angle of the climb. You'll notice this is steep all the way to this point here, and then it flattens out before you go to the summit. Much longer than the route that he tried on the other side. This just shows you how he came up the straightaway glacier onto the Peters and then up to about there before he was turned back. And I think it was weather and probably logistics. He had a big team, and once the team disbanded, he was able to go back with the strongest climber on it, which was Burrell. Another view of that same slope. Back in those days, it was all ice. It was all probably climbing something about that high, that angle, and about that high. That angle looks to me to be the same angle on the other side of the mountain that he said that he climbed. So he was able to get to about here on this side before they turned back. Yeah. So, I think we'll just go into some of my ideas. So I believe from what I showed you that the route seems viable and seems that he was capable of climbing that angle, and I believe very possible that he could have climbed it. I don't think it's very probable for a couple of reasons. About half the people who try it get turned back, and that happened with several other climbs. The sourdough climbs a few years after his got turned back. The Bellamore Brown expedition a few years after the sourdoughs also got turned back. It was only on the fourth attempt did anybody have viable proof that they actually got to the south summit. So that just tells you how difficult the mountain is. It's very challenging. It's a lot of logistics, a lot of work, and a lot of luck before you can get up. So viability, I think the Karstens Ridge is the same steepness, and the northwest buttress indicates the same steepness. So I think it's just as viable as either of those routes. One of the other things that takes place, especially now with global warming being on everybody's mind, the routes degrade with time. And I believe that there's a fair amount of documentation to support this. I believe that the Karsten Ridge route degraded enough that one group was able to go up it and down it in 16 hours round trip to the North Summit. And then just a few years later, Hudson Stuck and Karstens, Harry Karstens, had to chop steps all the way up, and it was very laborious to get up that same route that the miners had run up and down. So there was obvious degradation on that route. The quality of the snow, the angle and everything had morphed from when it was first tried to when it was second, third, and fourth time people tried to get up it. It was a different climb. It was much harder, as they wrote in their books. I believe that same process of degradation could have happened on the East Buttress as well. So when he climbed it, it could have been even easier than it is now. So when I look at it, I'm going like, okay, there's a significantly steep section in there, but it's doable, so viable. But it could have been even better back 100 years ago, 200 years ago. It was probably a different mountain. Lots more ice and a lot less steep parts to it. The other aspect of whether or not this is plausible is that there are two different types of climbing. We call it expeditionary climbing, which is what most people do. That's what Rainier mountaineering does. That's what all the guided groups do. Most people who want to get to the top will take plenty of fuel, plenty of food, and have plenty of supplies that they can last for maybe 3.5 weeks. And if you've got that much going for you, the chances of you getting to the top are greatly increased. Brad Washburn was a very remarkable climber on the mountain, and he said if anybody had enough food and fuel for 4 weeks, they would get to the top, because you can outlast any of the bad weather that comes through. And you could also get acclimatized. Yes?
Would you get back down?
Yes, that's mandatory. No, it's a good question. It takes us about 3 weeks to get up, but only 2 days to come down. So we got gravity working with us on the way down. So
The same way?
we usually come back the same way. I have traversed the mountain twice, which means you go up one side and down the other side. That's harder because you have to have all your equipment with you, all your garbage with you, it's food, fuel, everything.
Pack it and pack it out.
Exactly. And so you start off, typically on the south side, you'll start off with 120-pound packs and sleds. I mean, it's a lot of weight to move. But if you're doing a traverse, you end up with that minus the fuel. But these days, you're actually supposed to carry your poop out as well.
Wow.
Okay. I just mentioned
Composting.
it's composting in your pack if you're not careful. But that route of the Modril, which is where all the people who claimed to climb it early in the last century has degraded so much that the park doesn't even allow people to go through there now without special permission because it's so dangerous. The glaciers have dropped so much. All the rocks that were frozen in place along the moraine are tumbling down. So it's a very much more dangerous route. And I think that might have happened as well on the East Buttress. The route that Cook claimed to have climbed could have degraded quite a bit over the years as well. So there's two different styles of climbing, as I was mentioning. One is expeditionary, where you take the kitchen sink, you have 3 weeks worth of fuel, 3 weeks worth of food, 3 weeks of time off from the office. You know, it's all these things that you have. It's a logistically a much more challenging way to climb, but it's much more assured. We call it sieging the mountain, basically going to war with the mountain. Okay? But there's another style that is popular in the Alps. It's called alpine climbing, and it's basically you run up, tag the top, and run back down. There they have huts. So it's pretty easy. You don't have to carry your sleeping bag. If you can move quickly and you're lucky with the weather, you just zoom to the top and then you zoom back down. It happens. And as I mentioned, I zoomed Denali one time, 15 hours to the summit. I know people who have done round trip in 8 hours from that base camp. Let me back up. Yeah. One more. This is the airstrip. They have gone from there 13 miles to the summit, reverse that, all the way back down, and to the airstrip in 8 hours. 26 miles in 8 hours. It's a marathon, a slow marathon, right? But you're gaining, 9,000 feet in the process. So more than that. 13,000 feet. In 13,000 feet. Yeah, it's almost 3 miles of vertical going up in the sky and then come back down. So it's a lot of work. But people can do that. People who are fit, people who are motivated, people who want to get money to go to the North Pole, like Cook did, was motivated. People who have worked out and trained lots are in the elite class of athletes. They can do this kind of stuff. If you run daily, if you carry a pack daily, if you hike around Denali all season long, and you then say goodbye to the slow guys in the group, and you take the strongest guy with you, it's very possible he was able to zoom the mountain. Probable? No. It's hard. It's a lot of work, but possible. And that's pretty much the conclusion I would like to draw for myself is it's possible. You guys need to draw your own conclusions of whether or not he was able to do that. But I think able, yes. Did he? I'm still not convinced. I'd love to go climb the route someday, just to prove it's not only viable but doable. So, with that, I'm going to ask Aldo to see if he can play some recent footage. I just got back from a couple years ago. I guided in 23, and I got some footage. Yes, question.
Yeah, what month of the year do you fly?
Typically, you're right in the early parts of we call it early, June, May, June. Yeah,
Okay.
that's spring up there. So if you
When it's just melted.
at that elevation,
Barely.
it's just getting warm enough to start melting, but it doesn't melt that high up. I've seen it on the longest day of the year. That's June the 20th. I've seen it 40 below on the summit. So it's still winter up there, but that sun is very important. If you're inside your tent and the sun's shining on it, you could have it 80, 90 degrees inside your tent.
2,000 feet coming from sea level, and it's a big difference.
Big difference, yeah. And the air is much thinner.
Which one do we want to see?
Let's do the second one.
Yeah, part two?
Yeah, because it's got a lot of the storm. And I'll sit down and narrate over the narration. The footage that I'm going to show is from my last expedition there in 23. And my co-guide, Cameron Peterson, is also a videographer. And seeing how it was probably my last climb of Denali, unless I go back to climb the Cook Route. He wanted to document it, so I was. This is posted on YouTube, and there's 2 more parts coming. He said he's going to release 1 part a week, and I just 3 days ago got the second part, and so there should be another part coming up. I asked him to keep the names similar. He wanted to change the names around so that he could glean different hits from different parts of the internet. But I think he's ultimately going to call it Guiding Denali. But his name is Cameron Peterson with an E. Peterson. I'll be in heaven without a doubt. Darling, won't you climb with me? Yeah, climb with me. Yeah, climb with me. Darling, won't you climb with me? Climb with me. Yeah, climb with me. Darling, won't you climb with me? I'm complaining about my freezing fingers right there. guys, if you have questions, this would be a good time to talk them over. But if you want to see any more of that kind of footage, you can go to YouTube. And I think he's going to call it Guiding Denali with Alpine Ascents. That's the company I work for. I don't expect you guys to sign up for any of the trips, but if you want to, you can. But that's the way to look for any further installments is Guiding Denali with Alpine Ascents. All right. Well, the lights can go back up. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's the last 40 plus years of my life I've been climbing on Denali. I've been very fortunate. I think I mentioned climbed it over 60 times. And lots of those mountains that I pointed out earlier, all in that neighborhood. So it kind of gives me a bit of insight as to what Cook was up against, and also gives me great understanding of what a guy can do when he's motivated. I was able to, in 1988, become the first person to climb it solo in the wintertime, a 29-day endeavor that I took 16 days of food for. I lost some weight. But again, I know what people can do when they put their mind to it. And I believe that Dr. Cook and Ed Burrow were very fit from having done the circumnavigation around the mountain. And I believe probably anybody in that day and age could have climbed it in the time that they said they did. It was those two guys, Cook and Burrow.
How old were you when you decided you wanted to make the climb?
A good question. How old was I? Actually, I ran away from home at a young age and hitchhiked all over the United States and Canada. And I ended up in Alaska when I was 19. And ultimately, one of the first things I wanted to do was see Denali. And so the third day in the state, the second day in the state, I almost died of hypothermia. The third day in the state, after the storm terminated, I was in Denali Park when it finally ended. And as the clouds lifted, I could see the north face of the mountain, which is one of the biggest uplifts. There's only one other mountain in Asia that's higher base to top vertical lift. And the Wickersham Wall is what the north face is called after a local judge who was very popular. But the Wickersham Wall, the north face of Denali, is super impressive. It's just a wall of snow. It goes way up in the air. And as the clouds lifted, myself and a friend of mine that picked me up hitchhiking, we were watching it. And it became more and more intoxicating and beautiful as the sun in Alaska at that latitude actually does set, but the mountain's so high that it picks up the rays from over the horizon. And because of that, the mountain never got dark that night, and we could see what we call alpenglow, pinks and purples and oranges, mauves, all these really beautiful colors playing on the upper part of the mountain as the clouds blew away. And both of us were smitten. And he had actually been living in Alaska. I just hitched up from Texas, but he said, I'm going to climb that mountain. And I thought about it and said, I am too. So it took me 5 years of apprenticing myself to better climbers and working with the Alaska Mountain Rescue Group, a rescue organization that looks for people in the wilderness, and joined the Alaska Mountaineering Club. So when I was 19, I made that decision. And then when I was 25, I went back and actually climbed it for my first time. Whereas my buddy climbed it the next year. But still, 5 years of apprenticeship, that was well worth it. I've been climbing it ever since. Last year was my first time I hadn't climbed it, probably since I was 20, 25. Yeah. Yeah. More questions?
How do you acclimate? You know, I lived in Cheyenne for a while. I'm going from the east coast to Cheyenne. It takes about a week to get used to the altitude there and the oxygen levels. You're going from 6,000 to 17,000.
Well, 6,000 is nothing to sniff
Yeah,
at.
right.
When I first left where I grew up in Texas, Flatlander, Gulf Coast, 50 feet above sea level, and I hitchhiked to Colorado and tried walking up the street in Boulder, Colorado, which is 6,000. And I was amazed. It was like I was in molasses. I couldn't move my body quickly. And I didn't know it at the time what was affecting me, but I was real aware because I grew up being physically fit. I was on a swim team, one of the best in the United States. So I had good lungs and I knew I could move when I wanted to. So I found about altitude illness firsthand when I was 14 years old. It's a big deal. And for us to climb this mountain, the reason why it takes 3 weeks to climb it, it's not because it's so difficult physically. It's very challenging on the oxygen level. So when you get up to the top of the mountain, you're working with a third less oxygen than you have at sea level. Now that's a pretty big deal, especially if you're carrying 50, 60-pound packs. So it takes, most of the 3 weeks is just getting acclimatized. As I mentioned, when I climbed it in 15 hours, that was after I was acclimatized. So the actual distance, 13 miles and 13,000 feet, that's a challenge, but it can be done in a day or even 8 hours by some people. But they're always acclimatized when they do that. So most normal people will take 3 weeks, and of that I mentioned that we use the siege techniques, or what we call expeditionary climbing. We will climb up with our food and fuel, bury it so the ravens and the weather doesn't get to it, and then we will retreat and spend the night back down at our lower camp. And then we'll move the camp up, and then we'll repeat that over and over all the way up the mountain. So it's kind of a shuttling mission. And that way, you stress yourself, and then you go back and relax at a lower altitude where the oxygen's thicker. And if you do that appropriately, no more than 1,000 feet a day, 13,000 feet, so it should take you about 2 weeks, even before you get in position. But typically, people don't go for it until about the 16th to 18th day on the mountain.
You know, watching the video, we're very proud that you named the cook tent after Dr. Cook.
Yeah. I mentioned Cook was an amazing guy on lots of levels, but he was a thinker. When he was trapped, I don't know how many of you guys know his story, but I was most impressed about was I'm a big fan of polar exploration. And I've actually done the Shackleton crossing of South Georgia Island twice, which was an amazing finale for his survival feat down in Antarctica. But before he was trapped in the ice, a Belgian ship was trapped in the ice, and not only was Dr. Cook on that Belgica expedition, but so was Roald Amundsen. And Amundsen's one of my favorite heroes in exploration history. He was the first guy to go to the North Pole and definitely to the South Pole. And I say probably to the North Pole because several other people said they got there, but there was no proof. When Amundsen went to the North Pole, they had navigation equipment and modern cameras so they could document where they were. But they actually did it by air. They actually used a balloon. But the North Pole is always changing, and that's why I think the detractors of Cook, the supporters of the Perry expedition, said that he couldn't get there and didn't get there, but they couldn't prove that. And so they started trying to find fault with his claim that he got to Denali. So that's how I got involved. I realized that if he was good friends with Amundsen, he must have had a fair character, because Amundsen is a heroic figure in my life. And for Cook, for him to be befriended by Amundsen years after he'd been called a fraud and put in jail and all sorts of things, just shows me that he must have had some redeeming qualities about him. that Amundsen still considered him a friend and a fellow polar explorer. Probably one of the reasons we came up with vitamins, he did a lot of work with the Eskimo natives in Greenland, and realized that they didn't have access to lemons or oranges or anything that the British Navy had discovered. Like if you go on long sailing trips, your sailors get sick with scurvy. But if they have particular foods that have something magic about them, like citrus fruit does, they don't get scurvy. So that's how they decide there's some vitamin out there, some mystery element that people can get from fresh food. The doctor realized that the Eskimo natives in Greenland didn't have scurvy, and they lived in the dark, and they didn't eat fresh vegetables or citrus fruit. So where were they getting their vitamins from? So he did two things when he was trapped in the ice down there. He surmised that sunlight was good for your body, and I'm sure he learned that from the Eskimos, who go without any solar for most of the winter. But when they get an opportunity, they strip down and they suck up as much sunlight as possible. He made the whole crew of the Belgica, all the sailors, every day had to go expose themselves to the flames standing next to the light coming off the coal-burning furnace in the hold of the ship, so that they could get whatever energy, we now know it as vitamin A, but he thought there was something positive about sunlight that was, or vitamin D, excuse me. So the vitamin D was coming in from light. And you probably don't get a lot off a coal fire, but he thought it was important. And the other thing he made them do every chance they got was anytime it was light enough to hunt, he'd send people out to get fresh meat, fresh seals, fresh penguin, and that sustained them and gave them the vitamins to last a whole winter. So they went for not just the normal 2-month crossing of the ocean, they went for 6 months plus without any citrus fruit, out with any vegetables. So he was on to something, and later on it turns out there's vitamin C and there's vitamin D, and these were things that he knew about and solved for without knowing what it was. But he was a thinker. He was putting things together. Did I go off course? Yeah.
Great.
Question?
Why do you bring your guitar everywhere you go?
Well, that's a good question.
That's how you got the job here, by the way.
Yeah. But, that's how I got the job. First of all, I'm always traveling. So if I don't take it with me, I won't play it. So, but I had made a commitment many, many years ago that to incorporate some art in my life. And when I was hitchhiking, all I could carry was my harmonica. So I taught myself basically how to play harmonica while I was hitchhiking around the United States and Canada. While I was doing that, I got a job for Mother Earth News. I don't know if anybody's read that magazine. Right when they were first starting, they needed some help, and I was thinking that was a very good organization to work for. But I was driving truck for them, and we stopped in a little town in North Carolina, and I went in to buy a harmonica at the music store, and right below the harmonicas in the same glass case, there was a violin, and it was a guitar harmonica type store, not a classic instrument store. So I looked around and I said, "How long has that been there?" She said, "About 2 years." I said, "It was for $50. I said, "Sell it for 40, I'll take it." And she said, "45. I said, "Sold." So I walked out with a fiddle, climbed up into the truck, and my co-driver, who was at the wheel, he said, "What? That doesn't look like a harmonica." And I said, "No, I got a harmonica, but this was such a good deal, I had to get it." He says, "Do you play?" And I said, "No." He said, "Why'd you buy it?" I said, "Well, it's very pretty, and I've got all this extra time while you're driving, I can learn." Dave went crazy in a short order. But I carried my fiddle with me everywhere I went for many years. and it's really awkward to play in cold conditions, as you can imagine. Anyway. However, there's a story over here. If you ever want to look at part of my life, it's laying here on the table. But there's a co-guide whose name is Marty Rainey. He runs a show, a TV show today. It's called Homestead Rescue. Highly recommend it if you've ever seen it. You'll know who I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, it's good, wholesome entertainment of how people who are trying to live on the land always have challenges, and he goes around and helps them out with their challenges. Anyway, Marty carried his guitar up there. He heard that I had carried my fiddle up there, and so he decided he wanted to guide with me. And so we started working together, and he was so much fun. And I realized that you could do so much more with the guitar. You can sing, you can play harmonica, you can get everybody going, and you can pass it around, because lots of people play guitar. Ultimately, it was such a good experience that I made an album. I produced his album, and there's a CD over here. It's not for sale. It's the last one I have, but you can still find it sometimes. It was in a music store for sale up in Alaska, and the rep from Martin Guitar was traveling up to Alaska and visiting the music stores and trying to get his guitars sold in the shops up there. And he saw the album cover, which is two people on top of Denali, one playing the fiddle, myself, and my co-guide, Marty Rainey. And he said, "That's it, that's how we do it."
Nicely done. We got our audience. Thank you.
Does anybody out there read me?
Just kidding.
You can't touch these things. Sorry about that. Anyway, he said, "This is what we need. We need somebody to take a guitar, our new model, which they were just coming out with their baby Martin." They said, "We need somebody to take it up there and prove that it's indestructible." So they contacted us, and ultimately we ended up with a guitar. Unfortunately, Marty didn't go on the trip. He thought he had a heart attack, but he didn't. He actually had just reflux. But I ended up with the guitar, and I don't play. I play fiddle, I play harmonica, I don't play guitar. Anyway, we got it to the top, because they gave it to us to take up there and test it out. So we beat it up, no case, we just let it, slashed it to the sled, hooked it to our backpack like you saw that other one, and got it to the top. Fortunately, one of the ladies on our team, she did play, so we got some footage of her playing it on top, sent the photographs back to Martin Guitar. They made a poster out of it. They were really jazzed that we got a photo of it. I sent the guitar back to them. They took it apart. Their scientists looked at it and reassembled it, and thanked me for carrying it up there, and sent it back to me and says, "It's yours, thanks for carrying it." I was like, wow, cool. So anyway, then they said, "We know that's a little big, and we know you also don't play guitar, so we're going to give you a backpack mandolin." I said, "Okay, cool," because the fingering's very similar. I said, "Fine, great." And said, "And here's a backpacker guitar, one of those little oblong things, just for the fun of it. Thank you very much for your service." And I said, "Great." So anyway, I ended up with two guitars, and a friend of mine wanted to trade for another mandolin I had, so he traded a guitar, because it was one of those potato bag mandolins. I don't know. They look pregnant. It's really hard to carry them in the mountains. You need a bluegrass style mandolin for the mountains. Anyway, I digress. Ultimately, at the end of 1 year, I ended up with 5 guitars given to me. And one of the reasons is because I took this very guitar, the one that I took to the top of Denali, I took it up on Everest. So I've been very fortunate. I should mention I climb all over the world. And there's a book over there to prove it.
A little crazy. Stay with me.
Welcome back.
You sure you don't want to come in? No, I wouldn't.
There you go.
Twice burned. Hopefully you learned. Yes, question?
You did all of this while holding a job?
main job was guiding. Yeah, so actually, in the beginning, I was also working up on the north slope of Alaska, building radio towers. So it was kind of fun because I could spend all winter climbing cold, windy, dark, freezing structures, my kind of idea of fun, and get paid for it. And then in the summertime, I'd go up on Denali. But ultimately, I had so many guitars, I thought it was like a sign that I should give up the fiddle. And it was. A lot of people told me I should have given up fiddle, like 19 years worth of that. So, including my driver, my co-driver, he told me that 19 seconds. No, not in the truck. But, so I got this guitar given to me on Everest. I got a photograph. There's a picture of it over here. Actually, if I dare try this thing one more time. No, I'm going to make you look at the photograph. I took it to the top, and on the way down, I actually got hit with rockfall. And it was strapped to my pack, and as the rocks were zooming by me, one of them hit my guitar, which probably was aimed at my head. And at that point, I said, you know, guitar just saved my life. I should spend the rest of my life thanking it. So I carry it with me almost everywhere I go. My most recent one, coming back from Morocco 2 weeks ago, got crushed by the baggage handlers on the airlines. So I'm back to this one now.
So do you check your guitar when you travel?
Typically not. Typically I carry it on with me without a case.
Okay, forced you to.
Yeah, I just stick it. Usually, if the flight attendants are observant, they know I have it. But usually I kick it around behind me, and I usually take a window seat, so I just put it next to me. And you'll notice they're traveler size. They're small guitars. They're not opera. They're not the D8 models. But I can usually get it online on board. But this particular airline had really strict rules, and they're going to charge me like $50 for me to carry it on board. So I just said, oh, I'll just check it in baggage. That was a mistake. Got a little crushed. But got this one back out. You can still see the hole in it from the rockfall on Everest coming down from the summit. Because of that, they sent me another guitar, so that was my fourth guitar, and I can't remember how the fifth one came about, but 5 guitars in 1 year. I took it as a message from heaven. Any other questions, guys? Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for listening to my ideas on Dr. Cook. I enjoy that very much. And I want to thank John for bringing his ice axe in that he climbed Denali with. Thank you.
And thank you, Vern. That was amazing. And I'm going to take up a collection for my next trip up Denali. I have a little cup in the corner there if anybody wants to see me climb the mountain. Otherwise, you can hang around a bit. And if I don't get to climb the mountain, my other dream would be to play guitar with Vern, which is why we have our guitars here. So anybody who's not working, which is probably all of you, because we're here, feel free to hang out and play a couple songs with us. And thank you again, and there's lots more food.